But Don, I think we'd be remiss to not, just ask you off top your initial thoughts when you heard about the loss of Pete Rose.
He's such an interesting figure, and I can only speak from my own experiences that he was one of the most polarizing figures in the history of sports. And if you're of a certain age, especially if you grew up with sports radio, just how much he dominated the conversation. And one of the great sports debates of all time, if not the greatest sports debate, is does he deserve to be in the Hall of Fame? He is the all-time hits leader, and he's not in the Hall of Fame. We know why, because of the gambling. But what took away from just a very interesting character, he's Charlie Hustle, one of the great players in the history of baseball. Rookie year in 1963, played right through as player manager with the Reds in the mid-'80s. A personality, a quirky guy that unfortunately, and by his own doing, Peter, became the polarizing figure because of his gambling problem, his betting on baseball, and his banishment from the game and his banishment from the Hall of Fame. And it's kind of a shame because he was a tremendous ball player, one of the greats, over 4,000 hits. And yet the conversation is always going to be about his banishment and A. Bartlett Giamatti's decision to ban him from baseball and the decision by not allowing him in the Hall of Fame. But it obscures what was an amazing career with the Reds, with the Expos, with the Phillies, and just a generational ball player. We had the pleasure of meeting him, Peter. He came in studio, and just a tremendous character, and one of the most famous names in the history of baseball. Really, no matter how old you are, you know Pete Rose. For whatever reason, you knew about him, you knew the name, you knew some part of his history. So it was a tough loss. It certainly was. And as crazy a guy that he was still a tremendous ball player and a really good interview, and just he'll be missed for sure because he definitely had a lot to say, very opinionated, and baseball is going to miss him.
He's one of the greats of all time, an absolute iconic athlete. Obviously, a spark plug for conversation and controversy. I can't help but think, and for me personally, of course, Don, he resonates in a weird way for me because my name is so similar to his.
Right.
And my parents actually, they thought my name would be cooler. They actually, I think I've told you this, they tried to push me to change my name to Pete Rose when I got into the, show business.
Oh, really?
They were like, you want to be big in show business, Rosenberg. Yeah, go to Pete Rose. That's a name. So I've always thought about that. And obviously he had some really iconic appearances in WWE. That is a Hall of Fame he did make it into. And he celebrated there. But I got to tell you, I can't help but think at this moment, Don, and I do understand the seriousness of him betting on his own team's games, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's no remote proof that he ever threw a game, right? Like, I mean, the thought is, and I think most people believe, that he bet on his own team to win, which is not right, and it's not okay. But don't you think that in this moment, when sports and Major League Baseball, as much as anyone else, is so in bed with betting, it sort of feels more fraudulent than ever that he can't be in the Hall of Fame?
No, only because, Peter, it's the one unbreakable rule. It's the one place you can't go. And everybody knows it. You can't bet on baseball. Can't do it. And even in the current climate, if a ball player bet on his team to win through an app, legally, he'd still be banished from baseball. All right, so the fact that we're in bed with gambling, it still does not allow a ball player to be able to bet on baseball, never mind his own team to win. And it certainly compromised things because if he needed to win that game that he bet on, Peter, then he might have compromised his bullpen for the next game in which he didn't have money on.
Fair point.
But he knew he broke the rule. But just like...
Now, let me ask you this, though. Would it have made baseball look that bad if after all the years of punishment, when he got to be a very old man, they said, you know what, we've done enough. You were such a great ball player in spite of these things, and we don't accept it. And obviously now people know how seriously we've taken it based on the last 30 years that he's been through. We want you to know. Because I feel like, Don, if we'd found out from baseball that in his last days they'd informed him, we are going to honor you in the Hall of Fame. I think that would have been a tremendous look for baseball. Who would have been mad about that?
Well, especially since when you consider the fact he was calling games for Fox, he had been welcomed back into Major League Baseball ballparks. It seemed like that there was a paving of the way for that day to come. So, I mean, it would be hypocritical to have it happen now. Matter of fact, I think it would be disrespectful to put him in now.
You can't do it now.
You could have done it before he died to let him enjoy the moment. To do it after, to me, would almost be spitting in his face in the memory of him. So forever, him not being there is probably the right thing to do after what you put him through. But he also put it on himself, Peter, because here's also something that I believe would have happened. If he showed any contrition for it, I think that there might have been a day where he would have been allowed back in. But he leaned into it. You know, his relationship with casinos in Vegas, he leaned into the gambling instead of just saying, hey, I did it, I'm wrong, I shouldn't have done that. It took him so long to even admit it that I think he's just as much to blame as the Hall of Fame and Major League Baseball were to blame for how things went down. But just like drugs, Peter, the one thing that I think has aged well in favor of people like Pete Rose is he had a problem. Wasn't a bad guy. He just had a problem. Yeah. And it just like cocaine and drug use in the 80s, you were labeled as a bad guy. You were labeled as selfish. You were putting your drug use ahead of your team, ahead of the game. And then we realized as time went on, like with people like Darryl Strawberry coming forward and helping people, that these people had problems. They weren't bad people. They just had problems. And Pete Rose is among them. He had a gambling problem. So I think we look at him not as a bad guy, but a guy that had a problem, didn't know how to handle it, didn't know how to apologize for his indiscretions. But he always got involved in controversy. You know, we're talking about the Mets today. His fight with the Buddy Harrelson in the 1973 playoffs. Him actually, think about this if you're a fan of baseball at a certain age. He ran over Ray Fosse in an All-Star game. He barreled over the catcher to score a run in an All-Star game and injured Ray Fosse in an All-Star game. Like, that's the way he hustled. He could not avoid being the center of attention. He could not avoid being the center of controversy. I think deep down inside he loved it. He loved the attention. But there isn't anybody that ever thought about baseball or thought about sports that didn't know who Pete Rose was and felt something yesterday when you saw that he passed away.
Absolutely. Truly one of the most iconic players of all time for so many reasons. Let's talk to the people, Don, about the New York Mets. How are you feeling? We are a few hours away now. 2.5 hours away from first pitch in a Mets playoff game. How's it feeling?
It feels great, honestly. And, you know, you're living in the now. I mean, we have the luxury of being able to get paid to watch sports. And that game was unfolding while I was on the air instead of pacing back and forth like I would if I were just a Met fan that did something else for a living. But thinking about it, Peter, I don't think I am a slave of a recency bias. That is the greatest regular season game the Mets ever participated in, and is right, you know, obviously behind, but right in the same conversation with the Game 6s in 1986. Now, where do you take it? I will tell you, I was disappointed they didn't win Game 2. I wanted to knock the Braves out. You know, they slayed the Dragon. It would have been nice to finish them off and have them not in the playoffs, but that didn't happen. Mets lost the game 3-0. They will take on the Milwaukee Brewers. But there was a part of me that wanted them to finish off the Braves last night, beat them, knock them out of the playoffs, go to San Diego. Yeah, the travel would have been a lot worse. Maybe the Padres are a better team. That'll ultimately be decided over the next few weeks. But I wanted to end the Braves season. That didn't happen. They move on. They're in the playoffs against the Brewers team that's owned them in recent vintage. But watching the way they won that game, how do you not feel good about their chances, Peter? How do you not feel like this is a team that just refuses to be denied? So I'm looking forward to it. Should be a lot of fun. Format does not help them to have any kind of margin for error. It's a best of 3 with all 3 games being in Milwaukee. They're going to be tired. They're going to be probably run through the ringer after having to play yesterday, get on a plane, fly to Milwaukee. But if you believe in momentum, Peter, they should have it. And let's see if it can carry over to stealing Game 1 here with Severino on the mound and putting a ton of pressure on the Brewers tomorrow and a chance to advance to the divisional round. And what a story that would be.
Here's the deal. We're going to get you all ready all afternoon. We also got to talk some Aaron Rodgers and New York Jets. He had some interesting things to say to Pat McAfee, so we got to talk about that as well. And then we will be off the air around 4:40 p.m. To make room for Met pregame and get you all set right here on 880. Afterwards, depending on timing, there may be some Dan Grassa, and then right after that at 9 o'clock, we'll have Ty Butler. So we will have live programming all after the Mets game tonight. Let's hit Game Time, brought to you by Tullamore Dew Irish Whiskey. 2 New York playoff games tonight. You got the Mets, who are back in Milwaukee to face the Brewers in the wild card, with coverage starting, like I said, right here at 4:45 on 880. And my New York Liberty look to go up 2-0 on the Aces in Game 2 of the WNBA semis. Of course, they have not lost a playoff game yet. That starts at 7:30. That's Game Time, brought to you by Tullamore Dew Irish Whiskey. Because when it's game time, it's Tully time. Tullamore Dew, the original triple distilled, triple blended, and triple cask matured Irish whiskey. Be sure to grab a Tullamore Dew or try the brand new Tullamore Dew Honey during tonight's action. Glasses up to enjoying Tullamore Dew responsibly. Let's get to the phones. A lot of people with a lot to say. And let's start out with our friend Danny in Centerport. Hey, Danny.
Hey, guys. How you doing?
Good.
You know, I never get a real chance to talk to you guys. You know, I call the radio show in the morning with my boys, and I speak to Bart and Hahn a lot. And, you know, I'm a lunatic Jet fan and bleed green, right? But that's not why I'm calling. You know, my passion lies there, and that's the only time I ever call to talk about. But, Peter, I listen to you guys every day. You know, I just don't get to call your show. My sister met you at the Bash. She loves you guys. Long story short, I really have to commend you, Peter. What you just said and what you brought to the forefront about Pete Rose is so 100% spot on. I can't believe it. This gentleman paid his dues, okay? Baseball made their point. They got their point across to the man that they weren't tolerating. I think everybody across the globe got the point. The fact that they didn't give him his due and put this man in the Hall of Fame is, to me, is a disgrace. The guy is bar none the best hitter in baseball, or if not talked about as the best hitter in baseball. What he brought to baseball was tremendous. He paid his dues. It is a disgrace in my eyes that this man did not get in the Hall of Fame. I don't bleed baseball, but you just struck a nerve with me. There's not one person walking this earth that has not done something that they regret. Granted, his mistake was a big boo-boo, but God almighty, we've all made a mistake. The guy should be in the Hall of Fame.
And at the very least,
Thank you, Danny.
Allow the voters to vote.
Right. At least put it in their hands, Don.
Yeah, at least put it in their hands. But right now, I haven't spoken to the family. His son obviously played Major League Baseball and is in broadcasting, and he probably could be somebody that maybe has made the rounds and has made some sort of a statement. I just feel like it would be a slap in the face to do it now, wouldn't it, Peter? To just go, oh, now that he's gone, let's put him in. I think it'd be worse than not putting him in. I can't speak for the family and certainly can't speak for him, Peter, but how hypocritical. What a joke it would be to all of a sudden find religion after he passed away and say, let's put him in there. It would be awful.
No, you can't do it. You absolutely can't do it. And again, I am not trying to downplay what he did. It's the cardinal sin. I get it. But to me, it would have been several things. It would have shown incredible grace and empathy of baseball after all of these years, knowing his name had been so completely sullied. But the fact is, Pete Rose, the player, was unquestionable. And to have a guy who's that great and who wanted it so bad, you know, he ends up dying an old man. It would have been nice if sometime in the last several years they just found a way to make peace, because don't give me the argument that if they had decided, you know what, they put out a statement saying we are at least giving it to the voters now, and we are going to give him the opportunity to be voted in. Don, there's not one person out there who would go, oh, well, now anyone thinks they could bet on the game. No one would think that. The message had been so driven home over the last 30-some years that why not give it the opportunity? Because now, Don, when we say goodbye to him, let's be honest, there's this terrible asterisk of sadness when we talk about him, because we know he never got to get that thing that he wanted. And on a human level, I just wish the voters had had an opportunity.
But you know what? At the end of the day, it's just a room where people gather in Cooperstown to take a look at the people that have a plaque. But
It doesn't change what
no
he did.
one could ever take away that he's had the most hits in Major League Baseball. Having watched him play, the people that care know all about him. So, yeah, it bothers me that he's not in the Hall of Fame. It could bother a lot of, certainly Reds fans and Pete Rose fans, but it should not take away from the good, the bad, everything that he accomplished. Do we really need to have a room to signify his true greatness? If you know, you know.
Well said.